A few months ago, we launched a podcast called Into the Killing. In each episode, we cover at least one cold case that was eventually solved. In our latest episode, we look at a very bizarre case that starts off with a family finding a body in their house. It turned out that the body had been in their home the entire time they lived there. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. But before we get into today's video, we're just going to take a moment to talk about our fantastic sponsor, Magellan TV. I'm always on the lookout for a great true crime documentary, and Magellan TV is always adding new ones. I recently watched a great one called A Stolen Life, the Sasha Lee Crook story. In July 2003, 8-year-old Sasha Lee Crook was playing in the front yard of her grandmother's home. She seemingly vanished into thin air. Sasha's disappearance rocked her community, but it was just the start of the tragic case. A Stolen Life is a haunting documentary that you won't soon forget. I also really like history documentaries, and Magellan TV has a fascinating series called Instruments of Death. This series talks about the history of weapons and how they were used in warfare. It also shows what the weapons do to the human body. It's a gripping series that you'll end up recommending to your friends and family. There's never been a better time to sign up for Magellan TV. That's because Magellan TV has an amazing, exclusive offer for criminally listed viewers. You get 30% off an annual membership, which means you get access to over 3,000 documentaries for just $3.50 a month. Simply click on the link in the description to claim your discounted annual membership today. If you've been watching with me and you let your subscription lapse, you can still claim this offer. So please check out Magellan TV today because you'll find something great to watch. You'll be supporting criminally listed in the process. Number 3. Merlin Santana. Merlin Santana was born in March 1976 in New York City to Dominican parents. When he was 3 years old, Santana's parents got him involved in the performing arts in the hopes that he would stay away from the street life. Santana got a break into show business in 1991 when he was cast in several TV shows and a movie. That year, he had 2 guest spots on the CBS sitcom Major Dad. This was followed by a small role in the first season of Law & Order. He also had a small role in an art house movie starring Joan Cusack. His biggest role was Stanley on The Cosby Show. Stanley was a boyfriend of the youngest Cosby children, Rudy. Santana appeared in 7 episodes of The Cosby Show over 2 seasons. Santana then landed a leading role on the ABC sitcom Getting By, which was part of the TGIF lineup. Getting By lasted for 2 seasons. Santana then got 2 major roles on 2 dramas, Under One Roof and Streakier, but both were cancelled after 1 season. In 1996, Merlin Santana landed the role that he would be known best for. It was Romeo Santana on the WB's The Steve Harvey Show. The Steve Harvey Show ran for 6 seasons, and Santana is credited with appearing in all 122 episodes. The show came to an end in 2002 with a final season of 13 episodes. In the early morning hours of November 9, 2002, Santana was at an acquaintance's home in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. He was there with a 15-year-old girl whom he had recently met, Monique King. Around 2:45 a.m., Santana left the home and he was sitting in the passenger seat of a car that was being driven by his friend and fellow actor, Brandon Adams. Adams had appeared in films like The Sandlot, The Mighty Ducks, and its sequel, D2. As they were sitting in the car, at least one man approached the car. Then a gunshot rang out and shattered the quiet of the night. The bullet went through the trunk of the car, through the headrest of the passenger seat, and entered 26-year-old Merlin Santana's head. Adams immediately sped off towards the hospital. At an intersection, he came across a police car and he flagged the officer down. Santana was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late to save the up-and-coming actor. The police talked to the people that Santana hung out with that night. This included Monique King. She told the police what happened that morning. King had told her friends, 20-year-old Damien Andre Gates and 23-year-old Brandon Douglas Bynes, that Santana had tried to rape her. However, this was a lie. Santana had not acted inappropriately towards her. Gates, Bynes, and another teenage girl showed up in their own vehicle. Gates was the one who fired the deadly shot. On November 21st, less than 2 weeks after the murder, both Gates and Bynes were arrested. In January 2004, Bynes pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 23 years of prison. A month later, Gates was convicted of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life. In March of that year, King, who was 17, was convicted of second-degree murder. She was ordered to stay in prison until she was 25 years old. There is no record of what happened to King after she was sentenced, so it's assumed she was released at the age of 25, and she has stayed out of the news since. A search of the inmate database shows no record of Brandon Bynes being incarcerated, so he was either paroled or he died in prison. 39-year-old Damien Gates is currently incarcerated at the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad, California. He'll be able to apply for parole in 2026. Number 2. Susan Cabot. Harriet Shapiro was born in Boston, Massachusetts in July 1927 to Jewish parents. Her childhood was a rough one. Her father abandoned her and her mother when she was young. Then her mother was committed to a psychiatric hospital. She ended up growing up in 8 different foster homes where she suffered horrible abuse. When she was in her teens, she got involved in acting. In July 1944, she got married to a childhood friend. It's believed that she got married as a way to escape her foster home. In 1946, she started performing in a nightclub in Manhattan under the name Susan Cabot. A year later, Cabot had an uncredited role in the classic film noir Kiss of Death. Cabot then found work doing commercials. In 1949, she was discovered by a casting agent. Cabot was then cast as the co-star in the adventure film On the Isle of Samoa, which was released in 1950. After that, she signed a deal with Universal Pictures. She ended up making 6 films with Universal. In 1954, she left Universal and started doing stage plays in New York City. She returned to the world of film in 1957. The movie Carnival Rock was a low-budget indie movie directed by the legendary filmmaker Roger Corman. This was the start of Cabot's career as a low-budget B-movie actress, which included films like Fort Massacre, Machine Gun Kelly, and The Wasp Woman. In 1959, Susan Cabot made headlines, and it wasn't for her acting. Cabot had a highly publicized affair with King Hussein, who was the king of the country of Jordan. Cabot, who was 36, met King Hussein, age 24, when he came to Los Angeles for a visit. Around the same time of the affair, Cabot stopped acting. In January 1964, Cabot gave birth to a son, Timothy Scott. Timothy was born a dwarf. Cabot never publicly revealed the identity of Timothy's father. In 1968, Cabot married a man named Michael Roman. Timothy took on his stepfather's last name. Susan Cabot and Michael Roman stayed married until 1983, and then they divorced. Susan Cabot apparently made money through real estate transactions and by restoring and selling classic cars. Cabot was in psychotherapy for most of her adult life. She had frequent mental breakdowns. One of her doctors said that she suffered from what is today known as post-traumatic stress disorder because of her awful childhood. Cabot continued to live with her son, Timothy, in Encino, California. Over the years, their house fell into disrepair and the mother and son filled it with trash. At some point, Cabot stopped leaving the house and she became a recluse. On December 10, 1986, Cabot's 22-year-old son, Timothy, called the police. When the police arrived, they were shocked by the state of the house. There was garbage and rotting food everywhere. Timothy explained to the officers that he had gone to bed at around 9:30 p.m., but got up about half an hour later because he was hungry. He said that he went into the kitchen and he encountered a Hispanic man wearing a ninja mask. He said that the man stabbed him in the arm and struck him on the head with a blunt object. Timothy claimed that he was knocked unconscious and he came to about half an hour later. That's when he called the police. The police noted he had a small bump on his head and there was a cut on his arm, but it was only a quarter-inch long and it wasn't deep. Timothy told the police he lived with his mother, but he had not checked on her. The officers went to the master bedroom and they found 59-year-old Susan Cabot dead in her blood-drenched bed. It was clear she had been beaten to death. Timothy gave the police permission to search the house. But the police had problems getting into Timothy's bedroom because he had two large Akitas, which is a dog breed similar to German Shepherds, and they wouldn't allow anyone into the room. One of the detectives called the dogs vicious. Two different teams of animal control specialists were called to get the dogs out. The police looked around Timothy's room and they found a clothes hamper with a box of laundry detergent in it. In the box of detergent, they found a weightlifting bar. It was determined to be the blunt object that was used to beat Cabot to death. The police quickly surmised that there was no man in a ninja mask and Timothy killed his mother. They thought this for several reasons. The first was that Timothy did have some injuries, but they were very minor. Secondly, the murder weapon was found in Timothy's room, which had two vicious dogs in it. Had anyone else entered the room, the dogs would have mauled them. So Timothy was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In April 1987, a few months after Timothy Roman was arrested, it was revealed that the relationship between his mother, Susan Cabot, and King Hussein had lasted for years. Also, for decades, Cabot had received $1,500 a month from the king. Timothy's lawyer said that King Hussein may have been Timothy's father, and the money could have been child support payments. Since Timothy might have been King Hussein's son, his lawyer wanted to move out of the jail because Timothy's heritage was Jewish. This is a problem because King Hussein is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Timothy's lawyer argued that Timothy, being a half-Jewish and half-Arab descendant of Muhammad, may have made him a target for murder. But Timothy was not harmed in jail while he was awaiting trial. Timothy Roman went to trial for the murder of his mother in October 1989, about 2.5 years after the murder. He elected to be tried by a judge and not a jury. Timothy's lawyer presented evidence that Timothy had been given a dangerous hormone from 1970 to 1985 to help him grow. Had Timothy not taken the hormone, he would have probably been about 4 feet tall. But since he had been given the hormone, he was about 5'3". The hormone was eventually taken off the market because some of them contain the virus that causes Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is a brain disease that leads to dementia and eventually death. Besides the hormones, Timothy had been given other drugs to help him grow. He had also been on a variety of drugs for most of his life for his behavioral problems. His mother's mental health also had a tremendous impact on him. When Timothy was 11, a pediatrician said that he was an emotionally immature, somewhat disturbed child who was having difficulty handling the demands of growing up. The hormones, the drugs, and poor mental health created a perfect storm that made him not responsible for his actions. Timothy testified on his own behalf. He said that on the night his mother died, she was having a mental breakdown. She was calling out for her mother. Timothy said that his mother didn't recognize him, and she attacked him with a weightlifting bar and a scalpel. But he managed to wrestle the objects away from her. Timothy said he didn't remember killing his mother. He also admitted he lied to the police. He did not think that anyone would believe him if he said his mother attacked him. In the closing argument, the prosecutor asked the judge to find Timothy guilty of voluntary manslaughter and not murder. He wanted him found guilty of voluntary manslaughter because he didn't see any evidence of premeditation. The trial had lasted 6 days. The judge took 10 minutes to reach a verdict. He found Timothy Roman guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Timothy had already spent 2.5 years in prison awaiting trial, so he was released after he was convicted. Timothy Roman died in January 2002 at the age of 38. Supposedly, his death was from complication of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is the disorder that was caused by the hormones that he was given to help his growth. There was another odd twist in the story 16 years after Timothy's death. In 2008, more files were released regarding the assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy. Susan Cabot was not involved in the 1963 assassination in any way, but several fascinating pieces of information came out regarding her relationship with King Hussein. Cabot and King Hussein met at a party hosted by an oil man, and it's believed that the CIA arranged the meeting between the two. They arranged for them to meet to keep King Hussein happy and to ensure he would continue to cooperate with the United States. It has never been confirmed that King Hussein was the father of Timothy Roman, but many people believe that he was. King Hussein died in 1999. Number 1. Phil Hartman. Philip Edward Hartman was born in September 1948 in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. He was the 4th child, and his parents would go on to have 4 more. In March 1957, when Phil was 8, the Hartman family moved to Monmouth, Maine. But they didn't stay there long. The family moved around the United States for several years. They eventually ended up in Westchester, which is a Los Angeles suburb. After high school, Phil attended college for a short time. But then he dropped out to be a roadie for a band. In 1972, he returned to school and studied graphic arts at the California State University, Northridge. After graduating, he started his own graphic arts business that designed album covers for bands like Crosby, Stills & Nash and America. In 1975, Phil Hartman joined the Groundlings comedy troupe, which was founded a year earlier. The Groundlings would go on to have many famous alumni, including Will Ferrell, Melissa McCarthy, and Lisa Kudrow. During his time with the Groundlings, Phil met Paul Reubens. Together, they developed the character Pee Wee Herman, which was portrayed by Reubens. In 1978, Phil had a small role in the mockumentary Stunt Rock. The following year, he made his first television appearance. He was a contestant on the dating show. He won, but supposedly the woman who chose him never showed up for the date. In 1980, Paul Reubens created The Pee Wee Herman Show, which was a stage play. Phil had a supporting role, playing Captain Carl, a gruff sailor. In 1981, HBO recorded a performance of the play and aired it as a special. During the 1980s, Phil Hartman continued to get minor roles on television shows and in movies. He also started doing voice work on animated shows, including Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo and The Dukes. In 1985, he co-wrote the screenplay for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was directed by Tim Burton. It was Burton's directorial debut. Phil had a small role as a reporter in the film. In 1986, CBS started broadcasting the children's show, Pee-wee's Playhouse. Hartman appeared in several episodes of the first season as Captain Carl. Phil Hartman's big break came in 1986 when he was chosen to be a cast member on Saturday Night Live. He developed and portrayed some memorable characters like Eugene, the anal retentive chef, and Unfrozen caveman lawyer. He also did several notable impressions like Frank Sinatra, Barbara Bush, and Bill Clinton. During his time at Saturday Night Live, Phil developed a persona that he became best known for. It's what the New Yorker called a pompous blowhard. In 1986, Phil went on a blind date with a model and aspiring actress named Bryn Omdahl. In November 1987, Phil and Bryn were wed. Phil had been married twice before, but the marriages only lasted a few years. In 1989, Bryn gave birth to a son, Sean. This was followed by a daughter a year later, Bergen. In the second half of the 1980s, Phil continued to do voice work in animated series. This included Dennis the Menace. Phil did the voices of Henry Mitchell, the father of Dennis, and George Wilson, the neighbor of the titular character. In 1991, Phil Hartman voiced the character Lionel Hutz on the second season of The Simpsons. It was supposed to be a one-time appearance, but more parts were written for Phil. He continued to provide the voice for Lionel Hutz, a down-on-his-luck lawyer, and Troy McClure, a faded movie star, who often introduced himself by saying, "Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might remember me from..." Phil was loved by the writers and the producers of The Simpsons. He was also adored by the fans of The Simpsons. Phil also immensely enjoyed voicing Troy McClure. He once said, "It's the one thing I do in my life that's almost an avocation. I do it for the pure love of it." In 1994, Phil Hartman left Saturday Night Live after 8 seasons. That year, he got his first lead role in a movie. He starred in Houseguest alongside comedian Sinbad. The film was a moderate success. Phil was also cast in the show News Radio alongside Dave Foley, Stephen Root, Andy Dick, and Joe Rogan. The show was a critical hit, but never found much mainstream success. But in the spring of 1998, it was renewed for a 4th season. So while Phil Hartman's career was going well, his home life was rather rough. His wife Bryn struggled with drug and alcohol addictions. Phil grew emotionally distant in the relationship and he would often avoid fights by pretending he was asleep. Friends of Phil said that he wanted to leave Bryn, but he loved his children and didn't want to break up the family. He also did not want to get divorced for the third time. On the night of May 27, 1998, Bryn went out for dinner with a friend. Nothing seemed to be out of sorts, and her friend noticed nothing unusual. After dinner, Bryn stopped by another friend's house and drank a few beers. She then returned to her family's home in Encino at around 1 a.m. It's suspected that Phil and Bryn argued, and then Phil went to bed. Bryn drank some more alcohol and possibly did some cocaine. Then Bryn grabbed a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun out of a lockbox. She then shot her husband, 49-year-old Phil Hartman, in the neck and the chest from about 1.5 feet away. She then shot her husband of 10 years from point-blank range in the face. After murdering her husband, Bryn drove to a friend's home. He immediately noticed that she was very intoxicated. Bryn told her friend that she had killed Phil, but he did not believe her. He assumed that they just had a fight. But then the gun fell out of her purse. He looked at the gun and thought it was loaded with 6 bullets, so he didn't think that she had fired any shots. Bryn spent about 3 hours at his home and then said she felt sober enough to drive. But she wanted her friend to follow her home. Bryn's friend agreed. When Bryn and her friend arrived at the Hartman home, he followed her inside. He saw Phil's dead body in the bed in the master bedroom. Bryn's friend went to another room and called 911. Bryn then locked herself in the master bedroom with Phil's dead body. The police rushed to the scene. The police got Bryn's friend and 9-year-old Sean Hartman out of the house. Then a single gunshot rang out. 40-year-old Bryn Hartman had shot herself in the head. It was a different gun that she used to murder her husband. Bryn's body was found on the bed next to Phil's body. The police found the couple's daughter, 6-year-old Bergen, unharmed in her bedroom. After the shocking tragedy, Bryn's brother, who was the executor of the estate, sued the pharmaceutical company, Pfizer. He claimed that Bryn's use of their drug, Zoloft, led to the murder-suicide. Pfizer settled out of court and gave the Hartman children a monetary settlement. Bryn's sister and her husband raised Sean and Bergen. They grew up in Wisconsin and Minnesota. At the time of this video, Sean is 31 years old and Bergen is 28 years old. Their family said that both of them are thriving. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out our podcast, Into the Killing. It can be found on Stitcher, Deezer, iHeartRadio, or anywhere you find great podcasts. Once again, thank you so much for watching.